Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Gardener. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's September 30th. I was going to record today's episode last night, and we had so much thunder and lightning that there was no way I could record. So just waited till this morning, and so the show is hot off the press. I was reading in Facebook yesterday a post from a friend who had gone to the trouble of planting all of these autumn crocus or colchicums in her garden. And like any bulb, it takes a lot of dedication to get those things planted. And then you have all of the anticipation waiting to see if they come up and if they live up to your expectations. Anyway, she'd invited some friends over to come in and check them out. And instead of being amazed by these beautiful autumn crocus, all the different varieties that she had planted, they were completely distracted by the blooming hydrangea. And isn't that the way it goes? We toil in our gardens, and then we invite people over to come and see it. And the plants that we expect them to be amazed by, the plants that have stolen our heart, are not always the plants that are the most popular with our visitors. So my piece of advice, if you have an affinity for autumn crocus, is don't plant hydrangea, or if you do have hydrangea, only invite other gardeners over. Gardeners that appreciate the dedication it takes to plant colchicum and are sensitive to the fact that if they've been invited over to see the colchicum, they will ooh and ah about the autumn crocus and offer merely a passing nod to the show-stealing hydrangea. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the botanist Sarah Hynes, who was born on this day in 1859. Hynes was born in Danzig, Prussia, and she immigrated to Australia in the mid-1800s. After graduating from the University of Sydney, she and Georgina King brought fresh flowers for a botanical display at the Sydney Technological Museum. This is how Hynes came to know the director of the museum, Joseph Henry Maiden. Maiden hired Hynes as a botanical assistant, and when he was promoted to be the director of the Sydney Botanic Garden, he hired Hynes to be in charge of the herbarium. Once Hynes arrived at the Botanic Garden, she ran into difficulties with her male bosses. She was pointing out disparities between herself and her male counterparts. She had requested better pay. In 1905, Hynes was suspended and cited for 39 counts of insubordination, including the use of the unladylike term low-down, dirty larrikin trick. Hynes stood her ground and denied the charges, and they were ultimately dismissed. But 5 years later, it happened again. After this suspension, Hynes had had enough. She transferred to the Department of Public Instruction. After this position, Hynes spent the rest of her professional life teaching science to high schoolers. William Fitzgerald named the Acacia hyanesiana for her in recognition of her work with Joseph Maiden on his book Forest Flora. And today is the birthday of the botanical artist Faith Fyles, who was born on this day in 1875. Fyles was trained as a botanist, but her natural artistic talent became apparent early in her career. She was the first female hired by the Canadian Department of Agriculture. In 1920, she transferred to the Horticulture Division, where she began producing colored illustrations of plant specimens, mostly fruits and ornamentals. Fyles is remembered for her work on the 1920 bulletin, Principal Poison Plants of Canada. The bulletin was prepared for farmers so that they could discern the problematic plants on their properties and avoid pasturing animals with poisonous plants. The book was offered free through the Ottawa Department of Agriculture. Over her career, Fyles had the opportunity to study with Stanhope Forbes in England and with René Menard and Lucien Simon in Paris. And today is the birthday of the Mexican botanist Helia Bravo Hollis, who was born on this day in 1901. Bravo Hollis was the first woman to graduate with the title of biologist in Mexico. By the age of 29, she was named curator of the university's herbarium, where she was assigned the job of studying cactus in Mexico. In 1937, Bravo Hollis published her work on the cactus of Mexico, making her a leader of global cactus research. In 1951, she co-founded the Mexican Cactus Society, and 6 cactus species are named in her honor. In 2001, the Cactus Society had planned to celebrate her 100th birthday, but she died 4 days shy of the century mark. Bravo Hollis also helped to found the botanical gardens at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She served as the director of the gardens throughout the 1960s, and when a strike occurred, Bravo Hollis offset the pay owed her workers with money out of her own pocket. Last year, Google commemorated the 117th birthday of Bravo Hollis with a doodle. And if you search for her online, you'll see a memorable image of Bravo Hollis in a skirt and blazer with a knife in her hand, standing next to an echinocactus platyacanthus, also known as the giant barrel cactus. And it appears to be over 5 feet tall and just as wide, a very impressive specimen. This species is the largest barrel cactus. In Mexico, where the cactus is a native, the hairs are harvested for weaving, and a traditional candy is made from boiling the pith. Today, the Helia Bravo Hollis Botanical Garden, with more than 80 species of cactus, is found at the Biosphere Reserve of Teotihuacan. In Unearthed Words, today is the birthday of the American poet W.S. Merwin, who always went by William. He was born on this day in 1927. In 2010, Merwin and his wife Paula co-founded the Merwin Conservancy at his home in Haiku, Maui. Merwin used the 19 protected acres surrounding his home to cultivate 400 different species of tropical trees, and many of them are the world's rarest palms. Merwin bought the property back in 1977, and every day he planted 1 tree. His story is outlined in an excellent opinion piece that was featured in the New York Times earlier this year. I have a link to it in the show notes if you want to read more. Merwin's poetry covers a range of topics, but here is a sample of some of his poems and prose about the natural world. Come back, believer in shade, believer in silence and elegance, believer in ferns, believer in patience, believer in the rain. Obviously, a garden is not the wilderness, but an assembly of shapes, most of them living, that owes some share of its composition, its appearance, to human design and effort, human conventions and convenience, and the human pursuit of that elusive, indefinable harmony that we call beauty. It has a life of its own, an intricate, willful, secret life, as any gardener knows. It is only the humans in it who think of it as a garden. But a garden is a relationship, which is one of the countless reasons why it is never finished. And finally, on the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. Today's book recommendation is Planting in a Post-Wild World by Thomas Rainer and Claudia West. This book came out in 2015, and the subtitle is Designing Plant Communities for Resilient Landscapes. Right from the start, one can tell that this book has a different philosophical underpinning than other books on landscape design. And I love that they incorporate the use of the word community, because Rainer and West are trying to get us to think about our gardens as communities. If we could begin to see our gardens and the plants in them the way Rainer and West do, we would be much more sensitive to the concepts of diversity and density in our plantings. But don't let those terms throw you. Rainer and West are all about extracting design principles that help gardeners focus on wise selections and year-round interest, all through the lens of community. If we could do a better job of understanding the way plants behave in the wild, our gardens would benefit greatly. And I love what they write in the beginning of their book, because I think it sets the tone for what they're trying to accomplish. The way plants grow in the wild and the way they grow in our gardens is starkly different. In nature, plants thrive even in inhospitable environments. In our gardens, plants often lack the vigor of their wild counterparts, even when we lavish them with rich soils and frequent water. In nature, plants richly cover the ground. In too many of our gardens, plants are placed far apart and mulched heavily to keep out weeds. In nature, plants have an order and visual harmony resulting from their adaptation to a site. In fact, the very activities that define gardening, weeding, watering, fertilizing, and mulching all imply a dependency of plants on the gardener for survival. So how do we shift the paradigm, making desirable plantings that look and function sympathetically with how they are evolved in nature? By observing and embracing the wisdom of natural plant communities. And then they go on to tell us all about them. Planting in a Post-Wild World by Thomas Rainer and Claudia West. And you can use the Amazon link in today's show notes to get a copy for yourself for under $20. Here's today's garden chore. Add some color to your garden with chrysanthemums. On this day in 2000, the gardener Stuart Robertson offered this humorous advice about mums in his weekly column in the Montreal Gazette. Before shutting things down for the winter, there are a few ways to make the fall garden look a bit nicer. Brighten up your fall flower beds with some colorful chrysanthemums. If you didn't plant any in the spring, so what? Markets and garden supply stores usually have lots of them on special this time of year. Buy a few of the larger pots, dig holes in the flower bed, removing a few poor performing annuals if you have to, and just drop them in and water them well. And if you do it when nobody's looking, your neighbors will never know. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. As I was researching the poet William Merwin, I came across an interview with him that was done by Joel Whitney back in 2010. During the interview, Merwin revealed that his mother used to read him poetry, and one of his early favorites was Robert Louis Stevenson's A Child's Garden of Verses. When asked about Stevenson, Merwin recalled that Stevenson had spent a great deal of time in Hawaii. Stevenson played cards with King Kalakaua, and Kalakaua cheated at cards. They obviously got along very well together, Stevenson and Kalakaua. They were playing cards one day, and Stevenson said, "I'll beat him this time. 4 aces." And Kalakaua said, "5 kings beats it all." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow. Low down, dirty larrikin trick. Acacia Heinesiana. William Fitzgerald. Oh, I'm going to keep getting these dumb notices. Hang on. Let's make sure we're pronouncing Fyles right. And avoid pasturing animals near poison. And avoid my gosh. Helia Bravo Hollis. Helia. Okay, it's Helia, not Helia. Helia. And today is the birthday. Okay, let's start that again. Let's make sure we're saying that right. Echinocactus. Not sure. Echinocactus platyacanthus. Echinocactus platyacanthus. Echinocactus. Okay, here we go. And a traditional in unearthed words, today is the birthday of the American poet W.S. Merwin, who was born on this day in 1927. In 1910, Merwin, well, that can't be. That must be in 2010. 2010. Okay, here we go. Brighten up your fall beds with some colorful chrysanthemums. Oh my gosh, here we go. Brighten up your fall flower beds with some colorful chrysanthemums.